There's this kind of funny divide among Donkey Kong Country fans, and it's not really a toxic one. There's not really a whole lot of toxicity in the fandom, but it's more of a quiet, ongoing, respectful debate that's been kind of simmering ever since Tropical Freeze came out, and even more so since Returns HD came out. Most people would tell you that, without hesitation, that Tropical Freeze is the better game. And on a technical level, they're right. Even people that prefer Returns HD, or Returns, I'm referring it as Returns HD, because it's the better version, obviously, will tell you that, yes, even though I prefer Returns, Tropical Freeze is objectively a better game. I just prefer Returns. Tropical Freeze is more refined, it's more creative, balanced, just better. But if you spend enough time in Donkey Kong, discussion circles, you start to notice a certain crowd, the ones who are going to tell you with a kind of nostalgic confidence that no, Donkey Kong Country Returns is their favorite. And there are people in my community, in my Discord, members of my channel, that believe that. They'll admit that Tropical Freeze might be smoother, prettier, even smarter, but something about Returns just feels better to them. And you know what? They might have a point. Because Donkey Kong Country Returns has a very particular charm. Something kind of raw, punchy, and just straightforward that Tropical Freeze, for all its polish, doesn't quite replicate. At least not to me. It's not that one's objectively better, even though I do prefer Tropical Freeze and think it is objectively better. It's that Returns scratches a certain itch that Tropical Freeze doesn't really even attempt to. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, and I've been working on this for a very long time. So if you guys could, consider hitting the subscribe button. If you enjoy my content, I make tons of Donkey Kong, Nintendo, Nickelodeon, SpongeBob content, what have you. There are some amazing things on the horizon. I'd love to have you join the community. Let's start with probably the most obvious difference, the enemies. If you ask most people what they remember about Returns, they might mention the Tikis. Those weird, subversive, hypnotic wooden mask creatures that made up the Tiki Tak tribe. And yeah, a lot of people back in 2010 dismissed them. They weren't the Kremlings. They didn't talk. Therefore, they were bad. But over time, there's been this quiet reappraisal, and I feel like, at least I hope, I've had a certain role in that. The Tikis fit the tone of Returns perfectly. They're bright, they're weirdly rhythmic, and most importantly, they match the whole musical energy that Retro Studios built from that game. Everything about the Tikis connects to sound. They hypnotize the animals with music, and they obviously can't hypnotize Donkey Kong because he's too stupid. They move in beat-like patterns. Their leader is literally a floating tiki drum, and Tiki Tong's design, my gosh, it's so peak. The game opens with a rhythm-based invasion of DK Island, and I still think this is one of the strongest openings in any 2D platformer ever. It's goofy, but it's so creative. It gives Returns this distinctive personality, something playful and cartoony, but something that still feels very dangerous, and if you become indoctrinated by these Tikis, you could very well die. The Snowmads, on the other hand, are much more grounded, and I did love this angle that Tropical Freeze took. These big, burly Vikings, penguins, walruses from a far away, frozen Iceland, what have you, Iceland, invading DK Island. They're cool, literally and figuratively, but they also just felt the teeniest bit more generic than the Tikis did. There's less of a real spark here. The Tikis feel like something out of a fever dream, like literally almost psychotic to me, but in a really fun way. The Snowmads are more traditional bad guys, invading the home island, but it did, give us some of the best, I think, levels in the entire Donkey Kong franchise with, Seashore War, Homecoming Hijinks, all those. They don't move to music, they march with purpose, and they're organized. They are a true army. But that sense of rhythm, that playful energy is just kind of gone. And I didn't love that. For some fans, that shift changes the entire tone of the game. Returns, a lot of the time, feels like a musical. A sometimes unorganized, chaotic one, but still rhythmic and very full of motion. And Tropical Freeze feels more like an epic. And it all depends on what you prefer. Again, I do prefer Tropical Freeze, but there are just some things that I think Return does do better and doesn't quite get the credit that it deserves sometimes. Tropical Freeze is grand, it's sweeping, and it's more serious. I know it's a Donkey Kong game, right? But the end of that game, when you're coming back to Donkey Kong Island and it's all snow-covered and icy and destroyed, it's truly emotional. If you grew up with that pulsing, bouncing vibe of Returns, the Snowmads might just feel a bit dull. It's also about tone. Returns feels like it's constantly vibrating. Every level has this kinetic bounce to it. The, albeit repetitive, soundtrack, the camera shakes, the platforms crumbling underneath you. It is relentless, but in just a really great way. The game's sound design really amplifies that as well. The percussion-heavy soundtrack by Kenji Yamamoto, which remixes a lot of David Wise's classics, which is a pro and a con, gives everything a primal rhythm. We're going back to our roots here. Even when the difficulty spikes, the game has this loud, celebratory feel to it. And Tropical Freeze, for all of its gorgeous music by David Wise, takes a more atmospheric route, which I will admit, I do prefer. I think David Wise's score for Tropical Freeze is 1,000 times better than the one for Returns. But going back to Returns, whenever I replay it, I just have to admire the simplicity of it. You know, most of it is just remixes, and that might have been necessary. Like thinking about The Force Awakens and Star Wars To A New Hope. They're arguably roughly the same film, structure-wise, the 3-act structure-wise, plot, everything. And maybe that had to happen, right? Like showing that we were back in form. And I think Returns did a really great job with that. With Tropical Freeze, you have Seashore War, Miss Abyss, Grassland Groove, for crying out loud. But they're more about vibe than the momentum, I would say. Returns hits you like a drum line, and Tropical Freeze washes over you like a nice jazz concert. It's not that one is better, it's just that Returns feels more, I don't know, big. It's like I know my script is great, right? It's like a chaotic cartoon episode where like everything is just so over animated and bouncing and exploding and collapsing and just insanity all around. While Tropical Freeze feels more like a 3-hour Francis Ford Coppola epic with gorgeous compositions and the cinematic pacing that you would get from one of those films. So people who prefer Returns often do because it's just got more raw energy to it. It's not trying to be refined, it's trying to be inherently Donkey Kong Country. Now let's talk difficulty, because this is a big part of this debate that I see. Tropical Freeze, make no mistake, is a very difficult game. But I do think that Returns is harder. Returns has a certain roughness to its challenge that feels more old school. They were really honing in those original DKC roots with this game. This game does not care if you're comfortable. Those rocket barrel stages, absolutely brutal. The minecarts, I love them, but my oh my are they so punishing. And when you mess up, it's not really the game's fault. It's yours. Tropical Freeze smooths a lot of that out and brings the atmospheric underwater levels back, thankfully. You have more character options, you have better hit detection, and better level design that feels a lot more carefully tuned than Returns has. And it's also more fair. But that also means it's less wild, less primal. In Returns, when you finally clear a level, it feels like that you finally wrestled the game into submission. It's exhausting, but it's so satisfying, and it's that just old school game design that I just love. There's something about that. The slightly janky trial and error rhythm that Returns HD has, and it makes it, in some areas, more memorable to some people. You can almost feel the level designers like laughing at you every time you would fail. As the barrels explode, platforms vanish under your feet, because it is trial and error. And that is what makes a great 2D platformer. Another reason that some people might gravitate towards Returns is just the simplicity of it all. I kind of already talked about this, and I'm not talking difficulty. I'm talking tone, talking story, talking vibe, music, just the whole ordeal. I'm going to go back to the Force Awakens to A New Hope comparison. Tropical Freeze adds more characters. Sure, you have Dixie and Cranky and even Funky, and they all have different abilities, great for variety. It's fun, and it also shifts the way that you approach levels and certain aspects of those levels and the platforming. But in Returns, it is just Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong. That's it. No frills, no strings attached. It is truly going back to 1994 to the OG DKC roots. The gameplay loop is extremely pure. You run, you jump, you roll, you slap the ground, and that's all you need. There is an elegance to that simplicity. And because the Wii version didn't have traditional analog movement, which is why I am talking about Returns HD, because I'm already getting mad. Returns just makes me so frustrated with this. What am I even saying? The forced motion controls. Not going to talk about it again. Returns HD is so much better. A lot of players, like myself, hate that motion control. Other players found it fun. I don't know how, but if you did, more power to you. But Returns HD, it just has this tactile feedback loop, and it feels so good. Tropical Freeze, for all its refinement, kind of loses a bit of that primal connection, I will say. It is smoother, it is better, but also it's just more standardized, I think. Returns, again, has this weird tactile feel that makes it uniquely satisfying to play, even if it is objectively, technically clunkier than Tropical Freeze. And that's the whole thing. Some of this might have not even been intentional. This could have just been the limitations of game design at the time, and we'd never know. But some of that just has so much charm to it. And then, of course, there is the nostalgia factor, which I won't even lie. I don't really have much nostalgia for this game because I didn't play Returns when it first came out. I played it a couple years after. You know, I was still fairly young, but I don't have nostalgia for it like I do for DKC. DonkeyKongCountry Returns came out in 2010, over a decade after DKC 3. Fans had basically given up hope for another real DK platformer, but when Returns hit, it felt like a miracle. And it wasn't a bad game either. Like, it wasn't you were anticipating this product, this movie, this book, whatever, and then it comes out, and then you're coping because it's actually terrible, and you're like, no, it's not that bad, it's not that bad. It was good. It really wasn't a sequel. It was definitely just like more of a resurrection. It was a revitalization of a franchise. And a lot of people remember that moment very vividly. The trailer with the jungle drums and the reveal of Rambi, the return of the classical themes. It was electric. Retro Studios was the perfect choice to helm both of these products and managed to bring DKC back into the limelight, back to life in a way that felt faithful without being just a carbon copy. Tropical Freeze didn't have that same shock value because it was more expected and honestly disappointing at first because a lot of people wanted Metroid. You know, there's a bunch of video essays out there that this game should have been Metroid. They were expecting Metroid Prime 4. They got Tropical Freeze. And I'm glad we got this game. It was the follow-up, the refinement, the, quote, we know what we're doing now entry. But Returns was a comeback story. And even though Tropical Freeze is, I'll say a million times over, is a masterpiece and is a better game than Returns, this is the one that reminded everyone how good Donkey Kong could be again. And finally, the last point that I have here is kind of something that's a bit harder to define, and it's just the raw personality that Returns has. It feels like a game that's constantly messing with you because it is. The levels have this streak, like this, like an underlying mischief, I guess. The surprises, the shifting backgrounds, secrets hidden behind every corner. Tropical Freeze is a lot more sophisticated. It's again, better game design, but it doesn't have the same what the heck just happened charm to it. Title Terror. I absolutely love Title Terror, with a wave smashing the screen. I know a lot of people don't like Title Terror. I think it's fun, and you barely have time to react to them. I love that. These are moments of chaos, designed to jolt you awake and keep you locked in. Tropical Freeze does have breathtaking set pieces, but they're cleaner. You know, they flow with the narrative. Returns doesn't flow. It erupts. And so when people say they prefer Donkey Kong Country Returns over Tropical Freeze, it's not about graphics, or music, or even objective quality most of the time. It's about feel. Returns feels older, arguably, but it feels primal, loud, challenging, raw, rhythmic, and unpredictable. The Tiki Tech Tribe, with their hypnotic beats, again, they are my second favorite right behind the Kremlings. I love the Tikis. They set the tone for the chaos that's going to be ensuing over this journey. Tropical Freeze might be prettier, sure. It's smoother, and it's arguably far better design than Returns is. But Returns just has a kind of jungle heart that beats maybe a little bit louder. It's the difference between a perfectly conducted symphony and a sweaty drum circle in the middle of the jungle. One is beautiful, but the other one gets your blood pumping. And for some players, that is what Donkey Kong is all